The boy had been home alone before. Plenty of times, actually. His parents both worked late shifts, and by the time he turned 11, they trusted him enough to let himself in after school. He knew the routine by heart. Drop the backpack by the couch. Lock the door behind him. Grab a snack. Turn on the TV for noise. Stay inside until someone got home. It was supposed to be a normal afternoon. He came in around 3:40 p.m. just like always. The house was quiet in that familiar hollow way it got during the day. No music. No voices. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. He locked the front door. He was sure of it. He even jiggled the handle out of habit. Backpack down. Shoes kicked off. He went straight to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of juice. While he drank, he noticed the chair at the dining table wasn't pushed in all the way. That was strange but not alarming. His parents rushed in the mornings. Someone probably forgot. He pushed it in and didn't think about it again. He turned on the TV in the living room, cartoons, volume a little louder than usual, and sat on the floor with his back against the couch. The noise made the house feel less empty. 10 minutes passed. Maybe 15. That was when he heard the creak. It came from somewhere deeper in the house. A slow, careful sound like someone shifting their weight on an old floorboard. He muted the TV and listened. Nothing. Old houses made noise all the time. He told himself that. Pipes. Unsettling. Normal stuff. He turned the TV back on. A few minutes later, he got up to grab another snack. When he walked into the kitchen, he stopped. The pantry door was open. He was sure it had been closed before. He always closed it. His parents were strict about it, said it kept bugs out. He stood there, staring at it, his chest tight for reasons he couldn't fully explain. "Mom?" he called out, even though he knew she wasn't home. No answer. He walked closer and shut the pantry door. It made a soft click when it latched. He stood there for another moment, listening. His ears felt hot, like they were straining too hard. Still nothing. He went back to the living room, but he didn't sit down this time. He stayed standing, arms crossed, eyes scanning the hallway that led to the bedrooms. The hallway felt darker than usual. He turned on the hallway light. As the bulb flickered to life, something caught his attention immediately. The door to his parents' bedroom was cracked open. It hadn't been before. He was sure of that. He always passed it on the way to the kitchen. He would have noticed. He stood very still. His heart started to pound, slow and heavy, each beat echoing in his ears. Maybe his dad had come home early and left again. Maybe someone forgot to close it properly. He took a step forward. Then another. The air felt different near the hallway, colder somehow. The house seemed to hold its breath. He reached the bedroom door and pushed it open. Nothing looked disturbed. The bed was made. The curtains were still drawn. Everything looked exactly the same. Except the closet door. It was open just a few inches. He stared at it, waiting for something to move. Waiting for someone to step out and laugh and tell him he was being silly. Nothing happened. He backed out of the room and shut the door. This time he shut it firmly. He went back to the living room, turned the TV up louder than before, and sat on the couch instead of the floor. He kept his feet tucked up like that would somehow protect him. Minutes passed. Then he heard it again. A sound. Softer this time. Like fabric brushing against fabric. It came from behind him. From the hallway. He froze. The sound stopped. His eyes slowly drifted to the reflection in the dark TV screen. He expected to see the hallway behind him. For a split second he thought he saw movement. He spun around. The hallway was empty. The light was still on. The doors were closed. He stood up, hands shaking now. His mouth felt dry. "I'm just imagining it," he whispered to himself. He decided to call his mom. He walked to the kitchen phone and picked it up. There was no dial tone. That made his stomach drop. The phone worked that morning. He remembered hearing his dad use it before leaving. He hung up and tried again. Nothing. That's when he noticed something else. The back door was unlocked. He stared at it, heart racing. He knew he didn't unlock it. He hadn't even gone near it. Very slowly, he turned the lock and slid the bolt into place. The sound felt too loud in the quiet kitchen. Behind him, something shifted. Not a creak this time. A breath. Close. Too close. He spun around. No one was there. But the hallway light was off. He hadn't turned it off. He backed away, pressing himself against the counter, his eyes darting around the kitchen. His thoughts were racing now, tumbling over each other. Someone had been moving things. Doors, chairs, lights. Not breaking in. Adjusting. Like they were careful not to be noticed. Like they were already inside. He ran to the front door and tried the handle. It didn't move. His hands shook as he unlocked it and threw it open. Sunlight flooded in, and for a moment, the fear loosened its grip. He stepped onto the porch and looked around, breathing hard. That's when he saw the muddy footprints. They led from the side of the house, straight to the back door. And only in one direction. They didn't leave. They stopped. Inside. He screamed. A neighbor heard him and came running. Within minutes, the house was full of adults. Police. His parents called home early. They searched every room. The attic. The basement. Closets. Crawl spaces. They found no one. The police told his parents it was probably a misunderstanding. Maybe someone tried to break in earlier. Maybe the boy's imagination ran away with him. But one officer stayed behind a little longer than the others. He asked the boy to walk him through everything again. When they reached the hallway, the officer stopped. He crouched down and pointed to the base of the wall near the vent. "Did you notice this before?" he asked. The boy shook his head. Scratched into the paint, low enough that a child wouldn't see it easily, were faint markings. Little lines. Dozens of them. Tallies. The officer swallowed. Later, when the family stayed at a relative's house, police went back to inspect the home more thoroughly. Behind the insulation in the attic, they found a narrow space just big enough for someone to lie flat. There were food wrappers, a blanket, a flashlight, and a small notebook. Inside it were notes, observations, times, routines. One page near the back had a sentence written over and over. "He doesn't notice when I move things yet." The boy never went back to that house. But for years afterward, he kept the lights on at night. Because the worst part wasn't knowing someone had been there. It was knowing how long they had watched him before he ever realized he wasn't alone. Every weekday at exactly 3:15 p.m., the knock came. It started the same way every afternoon, just minutes after the school bus dropped Daniel off at the corner of his quiet suburban street. His parents both worked late, and for nearly 2 hours each day the house belonged to him alone. He would toss his backpack by the stairs, grab a snack, and turn on the TV. Routine, comforting, predictable. Then came the knock. 3 slow taps. Not loud. Not urgent. Just firm enough to demand attention. The first time it happened, Daniel assumed it was a neighbor. The houses were close together, and people occasionally stopped by to borrow tools or drop off mail. He padded toward the front door, peered through the peephole, and froze. A man stood on the porch. He was tall and thin, dressed in a brown jacket that looked too heavy for the weather. His hair was dark, combed neatly to one side, and his hands were folded patiently in front of him. He didn't smile. He just waited. Daniel's parents had drilled one rule into him since kindergarten. Never open the door when you're home alone. So he didn't. After about 30 seconds, the man stepped off the porch and walked calmly down the driveway. No lingering. No frustration. Just gone. Daniel shrugged it off. But the next day at 3:15 p.m. on the dot, the knock came again. Same 3 taps. Same rhythm. Daniel watched from the hallway this time, his heart thudding harder than it had the day before. When he checked the peephole, the man was there again. Same jacket. Same expressionless face. Same folded hands. He didn't ring the bell. He didn't call out. He just knocked, waited, and left. This continued every weekday. Monday through Friday. Always 3:15. Never early. Never late. Daniel started timing it without meaning to. He could be mid-sentence in a cartoon, halfway through pouring cereal, and his body would tense seconds before it happened. By the 4th day, he stopped going near the door altogether. He told himself it was probably harmless. Maybe the man was checking addresses. Maybe he was looking for someone who used to live there. Still, something about the precision of it made Daniel uneasy. People didn't knock like clockwork. After a week, Daniel finally mentioned it to his parents at dinner. "There's this guy who knocks on the door every day after school," he said casually, trying not to sound scared. "Always at the same time." His mother frowned. "What guy?" Daniel described him. The jacket. The way he stood. The fact that he never spoke. His father exchanged a look with his mother. "Did you open the door?" "No." "Good," his father said quickly. "You did the right thing. They promised to keep an eye out." His dad even drove through the neighborhood the next afternoon around 3:15, but the man never appeared. Daniel thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The following Monday the knock returned. This time after the third tap the man spoke. "Daniel," he said softly. Daniel was standing in the kitchen. The sound of his name sent a jolt through him so sharp his knees almost buckled. He hadn't told anyone his name. Not the neighbors. Not strangers. No one. He stayed frozen, barely breathing. "Daniel," the man said again, closer to the door now. "I just need to talk to you." The voice was calm, patient, almost gentle. Daniel backed away, his heart hammering in his chest. He ran upstairs and locked himself in his bedroom, crouching by the window until he saw the man leave the driveway. That night his parents took it seriously. They called the non-emergency police line. An officer came by, took notes, and promised extra patrols. He suggested Daniel stay with a neighbor after school for a few days, just to be safe. For a while the knocking stopped. 2 weeks passed without incident. Daniel began to relax. He stayed home alone again, though he never stopped checking the clock. Then one Thursday afternoon at exactly 3:15 p.m. the knock came back. Only this time, it didn't stop after 3 taps. The knocking continued, slow, deliberate, as if the man knew Daniel was inside and was no longer pretending otherwise. Daniel hid in the hallway, phone clutched in his hands as he dialed his mother. It went straight to voicemail. The knocking paused. Then came the sound that made his blood run cold. The door handle rattled. Not violently. Not desperately. Just a gentle test. A quiet twist, as if the man was checking whether today was the day it would finally open. Daniel screamed and bolted upstairs, locking himself in the bathroom. He stayed there until his parents came home early, summoned by the frantic voicemail he'd finally managed to leave. The police were called again. This time they took it seriously enough to canvass the neighborhood. That was when things became much worse. No one had seen the man. Not once. None of the neighbors remembered anyone matching Daniel's description. No doorbell cameras caught footage of him. No one recalled a stranger walking the street every afternoon for weeks. One older woman across the road hesitated before speaking. She said the timing sounded familiar. Years earlier, before Daniel's family moved in, another boy lived in that house. He used to get home from school around the same time. He was often alone. One afternoon he disappeared. The case went cold. No forced entry. No witnesses. Just a house left quiet and unanswered. Daniel's parents moved him out of the house that same week. Months passed. Life slowly returned to normal. Until one afternoon, long after the family had settled into a new neighborhood, Daniel's father checked the mail. Among the bills and flyers was a single envelope. No stamp. No return address. Inside was a folded piece of paper. Written neatly in dark ink were 4 words. "You were always early." At the bottom of the page was a time. 3:15 p.m. The knock had never been random. It had been waiting. The house was never completely quiet after his parents left. It always made sounds, pipes ticking, wood shifting, the distant hum of traffic from the main road. But that afternoon, the silence felt deliberate, like something was holding its breath. He was 12 years old, standing in the middle of the living room, watching his parents' car disappear down the street through the thin gap in the curtains. They were only supposed to be gone for a few hours. A short errand. He'd done this before. Still, he locked the door after they left. Then he checked it again. There was no landline in the house anymore. His parents had gotten rid of it months earlier to save money. No cell phone either, he wasn't old enough for one yet. If anything happened, the plan was simple. Stay inside, don't answer the door, and wait. He tried to distract himself with television, but every commercial break reminded him how alone he was. The house felt bigger when no adults were in it. Hallways stretched longer. Shadows stayed darker. That's when the phone rang. It wasn't loud. Just a soft, metallic trill coming from somewhere nearby. Familiar. Wrong. He froze. The sound was unmistakable. A phone ringing. Not a cell phone vibration. Not the TV. A real phone ringing the way phones used to ring. His eyes slowly moved to the kitchen counter. The old corded phone was still there. Unplugged. It had been unplugged for months, shoved aside to make room for mail and grocery lists. The cord hung uselessly off the counter, not connected to anything. And yet it was ringing. He didn't move at first. He just listened, heart pounding, as the ring echoed through the quiet house. It stopped after a few seconds. He let out a shaky breath, convincing himself he imagined it. Then it rang again. This time louder. He stepped closer, every instinct screaming not to touch it. The phone shook slightly against the counter with each ring, as if impatient. He picked it up. Hello? His voice came out thin, barely audible. Static crackled on the other end. Heavy breathing followed, slow, deliberate, like someone holding the receiver too close to their mouth. Mom? He asked, panic rising. The breathing stopped. Then a man's voice spoke. Come. Oh. Familiar in a way that made his stomach turn. You shouldn't have answered that. His grip tightened on the receiver. Who is this? The line went dead. He stood there for a long time, staring at the phone in his hand. When he finally put it down, it didn't ring again. For a while, he convinced himself it was a prank. A power surge. Something explainable. Kids believed strange things when they were scared. He went back to the living room and turned the volume up louder than usual. 20 minutes passed. Then he heard the front door handle jiggle. Just once. He muted the TV. Silence. Another jiggle, harder this time. Whoever was outside wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. Mom? He called, even though he already knew the answer. No response. The handle twisted fully, then stopped. Pause. Then a knock. Slow. Firm. 3 times. He backed away, his heart hammering so hard he felt dizzy. He didn't answer. He remembered the rules. The knocking came again, louder. I know you're in there, a man's voice called through the door. Your parents asked me to check on you. It was the same voice from the phone. He covered his mouth to stop himself from making a sound. The man sighed on the other side of the door. You answered earlier. That was rude, hanging up on me. His knees nearly gave out. Footsteps moved away from the door, circling the house. He heard them crunch through the gravel along the side yard. A shadow passed the living room window. Then the phone rang again. This time he didn't go near it. The ringing continued, longer than before. When it finally stopped, the house felt heavier, like the walls were closing in. A new sound followed. A soft click. The back door. Unlocked. He ran to his parents' bedroom and locked himself inside, pushing the dresser against the door as quietly as he could. He hid in the closet, pulling the door shut until only a sliver of light remained. Footsteps moved through the house. Slow. Unhurried. Whoever it was wasn't rushing. They knew there was nowhere to go. The footsteps stopped outside the bedroom. Silence. Then the voice again, right outside the door. I just want to talk. You did such a good job answering the phone. The doorknob rattled. The dresser shifted but held. After a few moments, the footsteps retreated. Minutes passed. Or hours. He didn't know. Eventually, the front door opened and closed. The house went quiet again. When his parents came home later that evening, they found him still in the closet, shaking and unable to speak. The police were called. The house was searched. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints. No explanation. The phone was still unplugged. Years later, long after he grew up and moved away, he learned something his parents never told him. That same afternoon, while they were out running errands, his mother's cell phone had received a voicemail. No missed call. Just a message. All it contained was static, heavy breathing, and a calm voice saying, he answered. The night it happened, 12-year-old Daniel was supposed to be completely alone. His parents were 3 hours away attending a wedding in another state. They had left before sunset, after triple-checking the locks and reminding Daniel, again, that he was old enough to stay home for one night. He had his phone. The neighbor had their number. And most importantly, no one else was expected to come over. That detail mattered later. The house was quiet in the way only empty houses are. Not peaceful, just hollow. Daniel stayed in the living room with the TV on low, eating microwave popcorn and flipping channels he wasn't usually allowed to watch. Every creak of the floorboards made him glance down the hallway, but he kept telling himself it was just the house settling. Around 8:40 p.m., there was a knock at the front door. It wasn't loud or urgent. Just 3 calm, deliberate taps. Daniel froze. His parents hadn't mentioned anyone coming over. He muted the TV and waited, holding his breath. A few seconds passed. Then another knock, slower this time. "Daniel?" A woman's voice called through the door. "Sweetie, it's okay. I'm your babysitter." His stomach dropped. "Babysitter?" He stood up slowly, staying several feet back from the door. "My parents didn't tell me about a babysitter," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. There was a pause. Then the sound of keys jingling. "Oh, they must have forgotten," the woman said lightly. "They were in such a rush. They gave me a spare." Before Daniel could react, the lock turned. The door opened. She stepped inside like she belonged there. She was in her late 20s, maybe early 30s, wearing jeans, a light sweater, and flat shoes. Her hair was tied back neatly. She smiled the way adults do when they want children to trust them. Wide, warm, practiced. "There we go," she said, closing the door behind her. "I'm Melissa. Your mom asked me to stay overnight, just to be safe." Daniel's heart was pounding. Something felt wrong immediately, not dramatic, not obvious, just off. His parents were careful. Overly careful. They would have told him. They would have texted. Called. Something. "I don't think so," Daniel said. "They said I'd be alone." Melissa tilted her head sympathetically. "I know, honey. Plans change. Weddings run late. Why don't you sit back down? I'll make sure everything's okay." She walked deeper into the house. Daniel followed her with his eyes, unsure what to do. She didn't look dangerous. That made it worse. She moved comfortably, glancing at framed family photos on the wall, stepping around toys like she knew where they'd be. "You can call my parents," Daniel said. She smiled again. "Of course. After I put my bag down." She didn't have a bag. Instead, she went straight to the hallway. Daniel's instincts finally screamed loud enough. He pulled out his phone and started dialing his mom. No signal. He tried again. Still nothing. Melissa stopped at the end of the hall and turned around. "Sweetheart, phones don't work well in this part of town," she said casually. "Why don't you put it down before you drop it?" "How do you know that?" Daniel asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she opened his parents' bedroom door. That's when Daniel ran. He locked himself in the bathroom and crouched in the tub, clutching his phone with shaking hands. He could hear her footsteps outside, slow and unhurried. She tried the bathroom door once, then twice. "Daniel," she said softly, "you don't need to hide." He stayed silent. Her voice dropped, losing the sweetness. "Your parents won't be home until morning." That wasn't true. They were coming back the next day, not staying overnight. He knew that. After a minute, she walked away. The house went quiet again, but not empty quiet. Occupied quiet. Daniel waited, counting his breaths. 5 minutes passed. 10. His legs cramped, but he didn't move. Finally, he cracked the bathroom door open. The hallway was empty. He crept back to the living room. The front door was still closed. Locked. Then he noticed something new on the coffee table. A printed sheet of paper. He approached it slowly. It was a schedule. Typed neatly. Friday, 7 p.m., arrival. Overnight supervision. Saturday, 6:30 a.m., departure. At the bottom was his full name, his address, and a signature that looked disturbingly close to his mother's. Behind him, a floorboard creaked. Daniel spun around. Melissa stood in the doorway, her expression no longer friendly. "I told you," she said. "I was hired." Daniel screamed. The neighbor heard it. Police arrived within minutes. Melissa was gone by the time they searched the house. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints. No trace of her at all. The paper schedule was gone too. Daniel's parents insisted they never hired anyone. Never gave out a spare key. Never told anyone their travel plans. Weeks later, detectives informed them of something worse. A woman matching Melissa's description had been reported in 2 nearby towns. Each time, she entered homes where children were alone. Each time, she claimed to be a babysitter. In one case, she succeeded. Daniel never stayed home alone again. And years later, when his parents finally sold the house, the new owners found something hidden in the back of the bedroom closet. A folded piece of paper. A schedule. With Daniel's name crossed out. The storm rolled in faster than anyone expected. By the time Daniel's parents pulled out of the driveway, rain was already streaking sideways across the windows, and the wind had begun pushing against the house in low, restless groans. They debated canceling their dinner plans, but Daniel was 14, responsible, and had been home alone plenty of times before. They told him the usual things. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone. Call if something feels wrong. Daniel nodded, standing in the doorway as the taillights disappeared down the street. When he shut the door, the house felt unusually quiet. Too quiet, like it was holding its breath. At first, everything was normal. He reheated leftovers, carried the plate to the living room, and turned the TV up a little louder than usual to drown out the sound of rain hammering the roof. Thunder rolled overhead, close enough to rattle the windows. That was when he heard the first noise upstairs. A dull creak. Slow. Heavy. Daniel barely looked up. The house was old. It had always made noises during storms. His parents joked that it complained whenever the weather changed. A second sound followed. Then a third. Something like footsteps. He muted the TV. The noises came from the hallway above him, pacing from one end to the other. Not hurried. Not sneaking. Just moving. Daniel told himself it was the wind shifting the beams. He told himself it was pipes. He told himself it was everything except what it sounded like. The noise stopped. He exhaled and laughed under his breath, annoyed at himself. The storm intensified, rain slamming against the siding, thunder cracking so loud it made him jump. Minutes passed. Then something hit the roof. Hard. Daniel flinched, heart racing. He stood and walked to the base of the stairs, peering upward into the dark hallway. The lights upstairs were off, the stairwell lit only by the faint glow from the living room behind him. Just the storm, he whispered, mostly to convince himself. He went back to the couch. The second round of noises didn't sound like creaking. It sounded wet. A slow, dragging sound echoed above him, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. The sound stopped directly over his head. Daniel froze. The TV continued playing quietly, a laugh track drifting through the room, completely wrong for the moment. He muted it again, holding his breath. Another sound followed. A soft thud. Then another. They were descending. One step at a time. Daniel stood up slowly, eyes locked on the staircase. The shadows at the top of the stairs didn't move, but the sound continued, closer now. Step. Pause. Step. His heart pounded so hard he thought he might be sick. "Dad?" he called out, his voice cracking. No answer. The sound stopped again. For a long moment, there was nothing but rain and thunder. Daniel convinced himself he'd imagined it. That fear had filled in the blanks. He took one cautious step toward the stairs. That's when he saw them. Dark shapes smeared across the hardwood floor at the bottom step. Footprints. Bare feet. Wet and thick with mud. They didn't lead up the stairs. They came down. Daniel stumbled backward, his legs turning weak. The prints were fresh, water pooling in the grooves of the wood. Dirt streaked across the wall where someone, or something, had brushed past. The front door was still locked. He backed into the kitchen, grabbed the largest knife from the drawer, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He listened, straining to hear movement over the roar of the storm. Nothing. Then the smell hit him. Wet earth. Rotting leaves. The sharp, sour scent of rain-soaked soil. It was coming from upstairs. Daniel bolted for the front door, fumbling with the lock, panic overtaking him. The knob wouldn't turn. That was when he heard breathing behind him. Slow. Deliberate. Too close. He spun around, knife raised, but the hallway behind him was empty. The breathing continued. From above. Daniel ran. He locked himself in the bathroom, slammed the door, and shoved towels under the gap. He crouched in the tub, phone clutched to his chest, whispering into it as he called his parents. No signal. The storm had knocked the service out. From the hallway he heard wet footsteps again. This time they stopped right outside the bathroom door. A hand pressed against the wood. Mud seeped through the cracks. Daniel covered his mouth to keep from screaming. The handle turned once. Twice. Then the footsteps retreated. Minutes passed. Maybe longer. Daniel didn't move until the sound of keys rattling at the front door snapped him out of his paralysis. His parents found him shaking in the bathtub, knife still in his hand. The house was empty. The upstairs was soaked. Mud covered the carpet. The back door stood open, its lock shattered. Police were called. They searched the neighborhood. No suspect. No explanation. The officers told them it was likely someone seeking shelter from the storm. A drifter. A burglar. But when they reviewed the muddy footprints, one detail stood out. The prints ended at the top of the stairs. They didn't lead out the back door. They didn't lead anywhere. They just stopped. As if whoever had been in the house never left. And long after the storm passed, Daniel refused to go upstairs alone, because some nights when the rain starts falling just right, the house still makes wet sounds. The house sat at the end of a quiet residential street, the kind where nothing ever seemed to happen. No traffic. No late-night noise. Just trimmed lawns, familiar neighbors, and the distant sound of dogs barking blocks away. That afternoon, 13-year-old Daniel was home alone. His parents had stepped out to run errands, something they did often enough that it didn't feel unusual. They told him they'd be back before dark. He believed them. He always did. Daniel had the TV on low in the living room, a bowl of cereal beside him, homework spread out but mostly ignored. Outside the sky was overcast. Not stormy, just gray enough to dull the light coming through the windows. At first everything felt normal. Daniel heard the refrigerator hum, the ticking clock above the stove, the occasional creak of the house settling. He barely noticed those sounds anymore. Then, from somewhere behind the house, he heard it. Daniel? It was quiet, almost gentle, like someone testing whether he could hear. Daniel froze. At first, he assumed it was his imagination. A neighbor calling their own kid. Wind pushing sound around the yard. He stayed still, listening, heart starting to beat just a little faster. A few seconds passed. Then again. Daniel. Clearer this time. It came from outside the kitchen window. He stood up slowly, the cereal forgotten. The voice wasn't loud, but it was close. Close enough that he knew it was meant for him. And worse, he recognized it. It sounded like his Uncle Mark. Mark was his mother's younger brother. The kind of relative who showed up unannounced sometimes, always joking, always too loud. Daniel had heard that voice his entire life. But Mark wasn't supposed to be there. He lived 2 hours away. And Daniel was sure his parents would have mentioned it if he was visiting. The voice came again, softer this time. Daniel. Come here for a second. Daniel didn't answer. He stepped carefully toward the kitchen, stopping just short of the window. The blinds were partially closed, leaving thin slivers of the backyard visible. Grass. The wooden fence. The old oak tree near the corner. No one stood there. Uncle Mark? Daniel called, his voice cracking. There was a pause. Then the voice responded, perfectly timed. Yeah, buddy? It's me. Something about that response felt wrong. Too rehearsed. Too quick. Daniel backed away from the window. His chest felt tight. He tried to think logically. Maybe Mark was surprising them. Maybe he didn't want to scare him. But why wouldn't he knock on the door? "Your parents asked me to check on you," the voice continued. "Come outside." "I can't reach the doorbell." That didn't make sense. The doorbell worked. Daniel had used it just the day before. And Mark would have just knocked. Daniel shook his head, whispering to himself that he was overthinking it. Then the voice changed. "Daniel," it said again, slower now. "I know you're in there." A chill crawled up his arms. "How do you know?" Daniel asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "I can hear you breathing," the voice replied. Daniel's heart started pounding so hard he thought it might give him away. He backed further into the living room, stepping carefully to avoid making noise. His eyes never left the kitchen doorway. From the window, the voice followed him. "You don't need to hide," it said, still using his uncle's exact tone. "I just want to talk." Daniel grabbed his phone and tried calling his mom. No signal. He tried his dad. Nothing. The Wi-Fi icon blinked, then disappeared entirely. Outside, the voice sighed. "Your parents aren't answering, are they?" Daniel felt dizzy. "How do you know that?" he whispered. "I know lots of things," the voice replied calmly. "Like how you lock the back door but forget the one to the garage." Daniel's stomach dropped. That was true. The voice lowered, almost comforting. "You always forget that one." Then Daniel heard footsteps. Not outside. Inside the house. Slow. Careful. Moving through the garage. Daniel bolted for the front door, but it wouldn't open. The handle rattled uselessly in his hands. Behind him, the door leading into the house from the garage creaked. A familiar voice spoke from just the other side. "Daniel," it said gently. "I'm inside now." Daniel screamed. He ran upstairs and locked himself in his parents' bedroom, shoving a chair under the handle. He pressed himself into the corner, hands over his mouth, trying not to make a sound. Below him, he heard footsteps moving through the house. Not rushing. Not searching. Exploring. Every so often, the voice would call out his name, switching tones. Sometimes sounding exactly like Uncle Mark. Sometimes like his father. Once chillingly like his mother. Each time it asked him to come out. He stayed silent. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Then silence. The footsteps stopped. A voice shouted from downstairs, unfamiliar and loud. "Police! Come out with your hands up!" There was a crash. A struggle. Someone yelling in pain. Daniel didn't move until an officer knocked on the bedroom door and told him it was safe. They found a man hiding in the garage. He had been watching the house for weeks. Learning routines. Learning voices. He admitted he practiced imitating family members by listening through open windows and phone calls. He'd learned Daniel's name from overhearing his parents call for him. But what disturbed the police most was something else. When they checked the backyard, they found a small speaker hidden beneath the oak tree near the fence. It was connected to a cheap recorder. On it was a single saved clip. A man whispering softly and clearly, "Daniel, come here," in Uncle Mark's voice. Later, when Daniel's parents returned, shaken and horrified, they hugged him and promised he'd never be alone again. But Daniel stopped responding whenever someone called his name from another room. Because sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet, he still heard it. From outside the window, saying his name. In voices that shouldn't exist anymore. They lived on a quiet street where nothing ever really happened. A short row of identical houses, trimmed lawns, and neighbors who waved but rarely talked. It was the kind of place parents felt safe leaving their children alone. That was why, when the Carters had to travel out of town for a weekend, they didn't hesitate to leave their 11-year-old son, Evan, at home during the afternoons. School ended early on Fridays and they wouldn't be back until Sunday evening. Evan had stayed home alone before. He was responsible. Quiet. The kind of kid who followed rules without being told. Still, just to be safe, they asked their neighbor, Mr. Harlan, to keep an eye on him. Mr. Harlan was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. He lived alone in the beige house next door. He waved every morning, shoveled the sidewalk in winter, and always had a polite smile ready. The kind of man parents trusted without thinking twice. He agreed immediately. "No problem at all," he said. "I'll check on him." The first day went fine. Evan came home from school, dropped his backpack by the stairs, and made himself a sandwich. Around 30 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. 3 soft taps. When Evan opened it, Mr. Harlan stood there holding a paper bag. "Your mom said you like turkey and cheese," he said, smiling. "Thought you might get hungry." Evan thought it was strange. He didn't remember his mom mentioning that to anyone, but he thanked him anyway. Mr. Harlan didn't come inside. He just nodded, told Evan to lock the door, and walked back to his house. That night, Evan told his parents about the visit over the phone. They laughed it off. "He's just being neighborly," his dad said. "That's good." The second day the knock came again. This time Mr. Harlan didn't bring food. He just asked a few questions. How school was. Whether Evan finished his homework. If he'd remembered to feed the dog. Evan froze for a second. They didn't have a dog anymore. It had died months earlier. Mr. Harlan noticed Evan's expression and chuckled. "Sorry," he said. "I must be thinking of the old days." He smiled again and left. That night, Evan didn't mention it. By Saturday afternoon, Evan started feeling uneasy. He couldn't explain why. Nothing bad had happened. But each time Mr. Harlan knocked, he seemed to know more. He knew Evan's parents wouldn't be home until Sunday evening, something Evan hadn't been told to share. He knew which cereal Evan liked. He knew Evan slept with a small night light plugged into the hallway outlet. When Evan asked how he knew these things, Mr. Harlan just smiled and said, "Your parents told me everything I need to know." That night, Evan slept with his bedroom door locked. On Sunday afternoon, the knock came again. This time louder. Evan checked through the peephole. Mr. Harlan stood there holding a spare key. "Your mom asked me to check something inside," he said calmly. "She said you might forget." Evan's heart pounded. His parents never gave anyone a spare key. "I'm fine," Evan said through the door. "You can go." There was a pause. Then Mr. Harlan leaned closer to the door. "You left the basement light on?" he said quietly. "You don't want to waste electricity." Evan felt cold rush through his body. He hadn't been in the basement all weekend. He didn't answer. After a long moment, Mr. Harlan stepped away. Evan watched through the window as he walked back to his house, unlocked his own door, and glanced back once more before going inside. That evening, Evan's parents returned. Evan didn't even let them take off their coats before he started talking. He told them everything. The visits, the questions, the spare key, the basement comment. His parents exchanged looks. They assured him it was probably a misunderstanding. Mr. Harlan had lived next door for years. He was harmless. Still, his mother decided to walk Evan next door to clear things up. Mr. Harlan answered the door almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting. They thanked him for checking in and gently explained that Evan was old enough to be alone without frequent visits. Mr. Harlan nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "I just wanted to make sure he was safe." Then he looked at Evan. "Especially at night," he added. His mother laughed awkwardly and steered Evan back home. That night, Evan woke up thirsty. The hallway light was off. As he stepped out of his room, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. The small night light, normally plugged into the outlet, was gone. In its place was an empty socket. From downstairs there was a faint sound. Slow, careful footsteps. Evan ran back into his room and locked the door. He didn't scream. He didn't move. He sat on his bed, holding his breath. After several minutes, the footsteps stopped. In the morning, his parents found the back door unlocked. Nothing was missing. They called the police anyway. The officer questioned Mr. Harlan later that day. He denied everything. Said he hadn't been over since Saturday afternoon. When asked about the spare key, he shrugged. Must have been a misunderstanding. The police had no reason to push further. That night, Evan's father decided to check the house himself. Doors, windows, basement. When he reached the basement, he noticed something strange behind the furnace. A thin sleeping bag, dustless footprints, and a notebook. Inside were pages filled with handwritten notes. Evan's school schedule. His parents' travel plans. What time the lights went out each night. Which doors were locked. Which weren't. On the last page, written in shaky letters, were the words, "Watching him makes the house feel alive." The police returned immediately. Mr. Harlan's house was empty. No furniture. No clothes. No personal items. Only one thing remained. A neatly folded night light placed on the kitchen counter, facing the window that looked directly into Evan's bedroom. The house had never felt empty before. That afternoon it was. Evan was 11 years old, home alone for the first time longer than an hour. His parents had gone to a nearby town for what they said would be a quick errand. Groceries, a bank stop, nothing serious. They told him not to open the door for anyone, not to answer the phone if he didn't recognize the number, and to keep the front door locked. The kind of rules adults repeat so often that they start to feel more like background noise than real warnings. Evan watched cartoons in the living room, feet tucked under him on the couch, volume low enough that he could still hear the house. The ticking wall clock. The hum of the refrigerator. The occasional car passing outside. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. At some point he muted the TV. He wasn't sure why. He just had the sudden feeling that the house was too quiet, like it was holding its breath. That was when he heard it. The unmistakable click of a key sliding into the front door lock. Evan froze. His first thought was relief. His parents were back early. But that thought collapsed almost immediately. He hadn't heard the car. No engine. No tires on gravel. And his parents never used the key. They always knocked first, always announced themselves loudly before coming in. The lock turned slowly. Not the rushed, familiar sound of someone eager to get inside, but careful, deliberate. The door didn't open right away. Evan stayed perfectly still on the couch, staring at the hallway that led to the front door. His heart was already racing, even though his brain was still searching for excuses. Maybe a neighbor? Maybe someone had the wrong house? Then the door opened. Not all the way. Just enough to let someone slip inside quietly. The door closed again without a sound. Evan couldn't hear footsteps at first. Whoever it was seemed to be standing there, just inside the entryway, waiting. Then a voice drifted through the hallway. Soft, calm, almost gentle. Evan? His stomach dropped. The voice was male, not his father's. Too low, too unfamiliar. Evan, the voice said again, a little closer this time. I know you're home. Every rule his parents had ever given him suddenly screamed in his head all at once. Don't answer. Don't move. Hide. Evan slid off the couch as quietly as he could, lowering himself to the floor and crawling toward the hallway bathroom. His knees trembled so badly he was afraid they'd knock against the tile and give him away. Behind him, he heard slow footsteps moving through the living room. Unhurried. Confident. The voice spoke again, still calm, still gentle. I just want to talk to you. Evan shut himself into the bathroom and locked the door. The lock clicked louder than he wanted it to. He backed into the bathtub and pulled the shower curtain closed around himself, crouching low and covering his mouth with both hands to keep his breathing silent. From where he hid, he could see a thin line of light under the bathroom door. A shadow passed in front of it. The footsteps stopped right outside. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the handle of the bathroom door slowly turned. It didn't open. The lock held. The man outside exhaled softly like he was disappointed, but not surprised. That's okay, the voice said through the door. Take your time. Evan's chest burned from holding his breath. His legs cramped, but he didn't dare move. Tears streamed silently down his face, dripping onto the porcelain tub. The footsteps retreated. Evan listened as the man moved down the hallway, opening doors. He could hear closet hangers shifting, drawers sliding open, cabinets being checked, not ransacked, searched. Every sound felt intentional, like the man wasn't in a hurry at all. At one point, the footsteps paused near Evan's parents' bedroom. The man hummed quietly to himself, a slow, tuneless sound that made Evan's skin crawl. Minutes stretched endlessly. Evan thought about running, about jumping out the bathroom window. But the window was small, and the sound of breaking glass would be impossible to hide. So he stayed where he was, shaking, praying that somehow the man would leave. Then the footsteps returned. They stopped outside the bathroom again. The voice spoke, closer now, lower. "I know you're scared," the man said. "Your parents told me you might be." Evan felt like he was going to pass out. "I have a key for a reason," the man continued softly. "They trust me." The handle turned again. It rattled slightly, testing the lock. Evan squeezed his eyes shut. After a moment, the handle stopped moving. The man sighed. "Well," he said calmly, "I'll give you a little space." The footsteps moved away once more, this time toward the kitchen. Evan listened as drawers opened and closed. He heard the refrigerator door open. A glass clinked against the counter. The man was making himself a drink. That was when Evan realized something that made his fear turn cold and sharp. His parents had taken their keys with them. No spare was hidden outside. No neighbor had one. Evan knew that for a fact. The footsteps eventually moved toward the back of the house. Evan heard the sliding door open, then close again. Silence. Long, terrifying silence. Evan stayed hidden for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. He didn't move until he heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. His parents' car. The front door opened again, this time loudly. Familiar voices. Normal movement. Light flooding the hallway. Evan burst out of the bathroom sobbing, clinging to his mother and babbling about the man, the voice, the key. His parents searched the house. Every room. Every closet. No one was there. Nothing was stolen. Nothing broken. They called the police anyway. The officers checked the doors and windows. No forced entry. No signs of a struggle. No fingerprints that didn't belong. When Evan's father checked the lock on the front door, he frowned. The deadbolt wasn't damaged. It hadn't been picked. It had been unlocked with a key. Later that night, while his parents sat with the police at the kitchen table, Evan overheard something that made his blood run cold all over again. His mother kept insisting there had to be a mistake, because the spare key, the one they never told Evan about, had gone missing weeks earlier, and no one had noticed. The house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen. Every lawn was trimmed the same way, every porch light came on at dusk, and every neighbor knew everyone else well enough to wave, but not well enough to ask questions. That afternoon, 12-year-old Marcus was home alone. His parents had left less than an hour earlier to attend a parent-teacher meeting across town. They told him they'd be back before dark. He believed them. They always were. Marcus did what he always did when the house became his responsibility. He locked the front door, turned on the living room TV for background noise, and microwaved leftover pizza. The normalcy of it all made the silence easier to ignore. For a while, everything felt fine. Then he heard the sound. It came from beneath his feet, faint, dull, almost like something being dragged across concrete. At first, Marcus assumed it was the house settling. The basement was unfinished, cold, and old. It made noises all the time. Pipes knocking. Air shifting. Nothing unusual. He turned the TV volume up and tried not to think about it. But a few minutes later, it happened again. This time the sound was clearer. Slower. More deliberate. Marcus muted the television. The noise stopped. He stood still, listening, holding his breath. His heart thudded loudly in his ears, filling the silence. Nothing. He let out a nervous breath and shook his head. His parents had warned him about this. How being home alone made every little sound feel dangerous. He told himself he was imagining it. Then he heard a single, unmistakable thump from directly below the living room. It wasn't loud, but it was heavy. Marcus got up from the couch. He walked toward the basement door at the end of the hallway. The door was old, painted white, with a simple brass knob and a deadbolt his father insisted on keeping locked. His parents never went down there unless they had to. Storage boxes, old furniture, holiday decorations. Nothing worth visiting. Marcus reached for the knob. It didn't turn. He frowned and tried again. Still locked. That was strange. The basement door was always locked from the outside. Always. His father was obsessive about it. But Marcus remembered something clearly. His dad had unlocked it earlier that morning to grab a toolbox and never mentioned locking it again. Marcus leaned closer and noticed something that made his stomach drop. The deadbolt was turned. From the inside. There was no keyhole on the outside of the deadbolt. It could only be locked by someone standing on the basement side of the door. Marcus stepped back. His mind tried to explain it away. Maybe his dad had locked it and Marcus had forgotten. Maybe he was remembering wrong. He pressed his ear against the door. At first he heard nothing. Then, very faintly, he heard breathing. Slow. Controlled. Too steady to be the house. Marcus staggered back as if the door had burned him. His chest tightened. His hands shook. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he didn't know where. The front door was across the living room. The windows were large and uncovered. And whatever was down there was between him and the back exit. He pulled out his phone and tried to call his mother. No signal. He tried again. Nothing. That's when he heard the voice. Marcus. It was muffled by the door, but clear enough to recognize the sound of someone trying very hard to sound calm. It wasn't his father. It wasn't anyone he knew. Marcus backed away until his shoulders hit the wall. Marcus, the voice said again, louder this time. I just need you to unlock the door. His throat tightened. He couldn't speak. I know you're up there, the voice continued. I've been listening. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. His legs felt weak, like they might give out at any second. Your parents will be back soon, the voice said softly. We don't want to make a mess, do we? Something scraped against the door. Fingernails maybe. Or something metal. Marcus turned and ran. He sprinted into the living room, grabbed the biggest kitchen knife from the counter, and locked himself in the bathroom. He shoved towels under the door and climbed into the bathtub, clutching the knife so tightly his knuckles turned white. He stayed there, silent, for what felt like hours. From the hallway he heard footsteps. Slow ones. Heavy ones. They moved back and forth near the basement door, then stopped. Minutes passed. Then the house went completely quiet. Marcus didn't move until he heard the front door open. His parents' voices filled the house. He burst from the bathroom screaming, sobbing, trying to explain everything at once. His father ran to the basement door immediately. The deadbolt was unlocked. The door creaked open. The basement was empty. No broken windows. No forced entry. No signs of anyone being there. Police were called. They searched the house, the yard, the neighborhood. Nothing. They told Marcus it was likely his imagination. Stress. Fear. Being home alone. That explanation almost worked. Almost. Until later that night, when his father went to put away the knife Marcus had taken from the kitchen. That's when he noticed something wrong. The knife was clean, but the handle was warm. As if someone else had been holding it recently. The family moved out 2 weeks later. The house sat empty for months. When it was finally sold, the new owners replaced the basement door. They removed the deadbolt entirely. But sometimes, late at night, neighbors still hear knocking coming from beneath the house. Always from the inside.